What's up? I'm Troubleshoot. Welcome back to another video. In this one, I'll be showing you how to optimize Dead Island 2 for the best possible performance. Now, of course, this game did come out a solid year ago, but it came out on Steam today, so there'll be a bunch of people hopping into the game looking for better performance, and that's exactly what this video is going to show you, an up-to-date performance guide with the latest Steam version of the game, but of course this works everywhere. So without further ado, let's begin. The first time you launch the game, if you haven't launched it before, it'll generate shader cache. This is good as it'll help speed up gameplay. While you can skip this, I'd highly recommend you sit through it. Alright, so hopping into the game, there's a ton of particles and things like that in this first scene, and it's a pretty good place to show off some different tech. So there's a bunch going on here. I'm not too sure how YouTube's compression will handle it, but this is pretty much as stressful as it gets, particles-wise. When there's a ton of different zombies, you may see different FPS drops and things like that, but as the game is divided into different little areas instead of just being one massive open world, it's pretty optimized, and of course, the developers have had a year to cook with this. So let's go ahead and talk about different options and what kind of performance you'll get by changing them. Heading into the pause menu, followed by options and display, in here we'll begin our optimization. So let's start all the way at the very top. Resolution should match your display. Window mode should be set to full screen for the best performance, but on most systems, windowed full screen should be good enough. VSync should definitely be turned off, and this should also allow you to move your frame rate way up to unlimited. This way we can get a proper benchmark of what exactly we're getting. So I'll exit out, saving changes, and you can now see that we're sitting at a solid 116-ish. Options, display, field of view. This is entirely your preference, and while it does technically affect FPS, it's really just whatever suits you best gameplay-wise, and the same goes for motion blur. If you're susceptible to motion sickness, lowering motion blur, if not disabling it completely, should help, but for the most part, FPS-wise, it's not really going to do anything having it on, cranked up, or off. So, once again, your preference. I personally like having a little bit less, so I'll set it to about 40%. HDR enabled, you can only enable this if you have an HDR display, and if you do, once again, it'll be a personal preference thing. Doesn't really matter what kind of FPS difference you're getting. The rest of these are pretty much your preference, but at the very bottom, we're going into advanced, where we can customize things much more granularly. So, overall quality, you should basically set this to however good your PC is. You can choose between low, medium, high, and ultra. So just to give you a quick idea, ultra settings, if we back out and confirm changes, we're sitting at 108-ish, 106, all the way down to low, we're now getting a solid 135, 130-ish. So not a huge improvement, but that just goes to show that only a couple of these options actually make a change, and for the most part the game is going to perform pretty well no matter where you are. So we'll run through the options here quickly, either work your way up or down depending on what your system is. I'll start on low and work my way up. For anti-aliasing, we have TAA high, FXAA, and TAA low. There's pretty much no performance difference between any of these TAA options, but setting it to FXAA should give you a very small improvement in FPS. Then again, it won't look just as good. View distance is quite a big one. It gives you a good performance boost having this on low, but medium, high, and ultra all have pretty much the same performance. So either have this all the way down to low, or probably ultra or high. Depending on your system, it's probably around a 10% performance boost, setting it to low, and anything above that, it's all pretty much the same. So I'll be leaving this to ultra just for the best view distance in game, but it doesn't really matter that much. Anything above low. Post-processing, once again, low will give you the best performance, and any option you choose above this loses about 8 to 10% performance. So once again, either have it on very low or anything above this. You can see in the background that there's a bunch of lens distortion and things like that whenever I raise it above low. So if you don't like that extra distortion and things like that, you can set this down to low and those are turned off. Otherwise, having it at anything above this will all be pretty much the same. Then shadows. This one's pretty good across the board. Low and medium are pretty comparable, and high and ultra will lose about 5% compared to medium and low. So there's mainly only two brackets here. Low, medium are the same, and high, ultra give you about a 5% FPS drop compared to the previous two. So once again, either medium or ultra. I'll be setting this to medium, as you're not necessarily going to be staring at shadows all the time. Then textures. This completely depends on how much VRAM your system has. So when you have it set down to low, it uses about 5 GB of VRAM, and cranking it to medium uses about 5.5. Each step above that seems to add about 200 megabytes, so if you have a 6 gig GPU, you could probably run this on ultra and be just fine, but you're kind of pushing the limits. It'll be around 5.8, 5.9 gigs used. So what would I suggest? Well, if you're running a 4 gig card, most definitely low, a 6 gig card, probably medium if not high, and anything above that, crank it up to ultra and you shouldn't see any kind of performance loss really. FPS should be practically the same no matter where you are. Then effects. This will be most noticeable in scenes like this with lots of fire and particles and things like that. Low gives you probably the best performance here. Medium is pretty much the same as low. There's only about 1 FPS difference, but cranking it to high will cost you about 5 and ultra about another 5 or 6 FPS. So medium or low gives you the best performance. High you drop 5 in total and ultra probably about 10 or 12 FPS if you're around 100. So for this, I'd recommend setting it to medium for the best, most consistent performance. Then foliage. You'd expect this to have a huge impact on performance, but pretty much no matter how leafy and green each area is, as they're all separate, smaller worlds rather than one massive open world, your performance stays pretty consistent between these. Low gives you probably the best performance by about 2% or 1%, but everything above this is practically no difference. So for this reason, I'd recommend probably high, if not ultra here, or if you're really trying to claw for more stable performance, low is probably the best. I'll leave it on high. SSAO, screen space ambient occlusion. There's practically no performance difference between low and ultra, so I'd recommend just leaving it on ultra. Scrolling down, indirect shadows. Once again, there's a very minimal impact on performance as these shadows are just so small. Having it on high is probably fine, if not ultra. Then screen space reflections. Once again, there seems to be two major groups here. Low and medium perform about the same. High and ultra perform about the same compared to each other. But between these two groups, medium and low give you the best performance, and cranking it up to high or ultra will cost you about 10, maybe 12% performance, but there's a huge impact on how these reflections look, especially if you're checking out a reflective surface like a glass door, a window, etc. For this reason, I'd recommend having this set to high if you have extra performance available, otherwise medium or low is going to be the best for you here. Then shading quality, there's not really a difference between any of these options to be honest, so medium or high is probably good enough. Then at the very bottom, AMD Fidelity FX. Unfortunately, there's no DLSS, so FSR is the best that we have, and it's only FSR2, so there's no frame generation or anything like that. Hopefully, as it's re-released on Steam, they actually decide to add something like that, as the technology is now widely available. Anyways, working with what we have, I'll leave this as is, leaving AMD FX variable shading turned on, and we'll see what kind of performance we're getting with our new optimized options. So, in-game, looking pretty much where we were before, we're sitting at a solid 114, 112-ish FPS, which is pretty good. If we pause the game, options, display, advanced, all the way to the bottom, and enable FSR, setting it to quality, there's a huge amount of difference in the background. I don't quite know why this is happening. Anyways, I guess the blur effect is removed. The quality option should have the least amount of visual artifacts and things like that, so if you're going to use FSR2, I'd recommend quality as probably the starting off point. So here's what it looks like, 118-ish FPS. Then we have balanced, was sitting at 126.7-ish, but you can start to see some weird artifacts, especially around fast-moving objects like particles, for example. Finally, moving all the way to performance, practically all of the particles are gone, if not reduced to just blurs, but we are setting at a solid 135-ish FPS. So overall, this does give us a pretty big boost in performance, but it comes with a really big visual cost as well. So for this reason, I'd recommend, if you can, keep this turned off completely, otherwise choosing quality if you need a small boost in performance. For me though, I'll be leaving this set to off unless I come across an area where frame hitching and frame drops become really bad, as this is probably going to be the best we'll get. And with that, there's not too much else that we can change for better performance. Anyways, that's really about it for this quick performance guide. Hopefully this video helped you. Thank you for watching. My name's been Troubleshoot, and I'll see you all next time. Ciao.